council member Tina Marquis feels the project does meet criteria, but that it's a little, quote, heartbreaking for her to think about, quote, the broken promise of civic space on this property. And with that, welcome to the House Einstein Podcast. I'm your host, Osman, and I am the founder of the House Einstein Brokerage. Our mission at House Einstein is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. And with me is Hamish Crab.
Hello, and happy 2025, Oz. First pod.
We're back.
A little intro about me. I hope the brokerage runs smoothly. I'm not just client-facing. I'll be back in behind the scenes, helping with contracts, helping with marketing, and really any void there is, I'm there to fill as a jack of all trades.
And has been for several years. So one thing I often tell our clients who get to meet Hamish is that he sees more real estate deals in a single year than most agents see in 10, given the volume that the three of us at House Einstein that are full-time agents produce. And we're a small boutique. We are not a large multinational corporation. We are not even a national corporation. We do have a very solid presence from Denver to Fort Collins. That's our footprint. We also cover a little bit of the mountain markets, and we're quite happy being a boutique. Now, with that said, it's time to dive into it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm a little rusty. It's been a while.
I know.
So the rusty part is we needed to hit our disclaimer. So for purposes of this podcast, if you are not a client, this podcast is pure entertainment. If you are a client and wish to get advice from us at House Einstein on your unique real estate situation, then please reach out to your House Einstein agent. You will find us at houseeinstein.com. If you don't have an agent, if you have not already established a relationship with an agent, then you can also just hit the contact us button on top and fill in your info, and we will get back to you very quickly. Our mission is to help you be smart about your real estate decisions, and that's what we do. But again, for the podcast, please treat this as entertainment. It's not financial advice or real estate advice or personal advice for what you should do with your real estate or anything else for that matter.
A little rusty, but I think you nailed it.
Sort of.
Today's topics, we've renamed our Tell Me Something I Don't Know segment to the closing table, and we've got a few things to talk about there. The team spent the first week of New Year's together, and want to talk about where we were and the takeaways from that. We have a new bus driver driving the bus that is our country, and so we're going to talk about some of our kind of expected impacts to the housing market there, the little note at the end, and then we'll dive into market conditions as we usually do, but this time looking at last year's data since that's out. Last year
just December.
Just December.
We're just looking at December. It's not a full year review. Yep.
Yeah. But now that December is out, we've got a little shameless self-promo, some sales of the week. One of the houses on there, Osman's really excited about. And I saw him email his wife about when we were picking them out. And then a little bit of news, which covers the quote at the start, some carve-outs, and that's a pod.
And hopefully we'll get this wrapped up in under 90 minutes. But if it lasts a little longer, well, our goal was entertainment. So hopefully you were entertained.
Absolutely. I'm entertained with our rust, but yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. Yeah. All right, so every year, this is our 4th annual retreat, and the company, the agents, as well as assistants on the team will squirrel away and spend a few days somewhere outside of our local market to talk business. And the first year we did this, we kept it local because one of the agents on the team really needed to be local. But since then, we have, well, not local, like we were in Breckenridge. But since then, we've actually left the country for 2 of our retreats, and we've had one in New Orleans. This particular retreat was in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is a pretty far away place from Boulder, but from a time zone perspective is only 4 hours apart. So that made it actually feasible to keep track of deals and keep in touch with clients. Of course, we always have showing coverage set up with other agents from outside the company. When we are on a retreat, our clients are never left behind because we are not locally available. But that retreat, I'll admit I was a little hesitant to do it when we first had a retreat. It was expensive. And I was really glad we did because it gave us a concentrated amount of time to individually reflect on what happened the previous year with our clients and our individual businesses under the House Einstein umbrella, and also set strategic direction for the next year. Process some of the lessons, put in place new systems, better systems, and really put in place a plan for how we're going to treat the coming year. And as the employing broker and founder, it's also really, I've realized it's really one of the best opportunities I have to deeply listen to what my team has to say about what they are experiencing in the market and what they are experiencing sometimes just in life too. I mean, we are a very closely knit team, and that it just honestly, this is one of the key pieces of our year, key events of our year, and it always makes me feel stronger as a working team. Like the energy with us is better, and it's like a redirection of the ship in a way, or a house cleaning all mixed together.
Yeah, I don't want to say reset, but a kind of a recalibration. You know, like it brings us back on track, and it's really, really beneficial.
Yeah. I was hesitant the first year again, but the payoff is very clear in so many ways. Although it's not transactional in that you spend $1, you get 3 out. It's much more in the way the team works together. And I honestly feel like this is the best team in real estate in a way that really is a team. Like we really get each other. We work very closely together, and we support each other in our transactions and our client relationships. It's just, I'm really proud and also grateful of the team that we've built at House Einstein. So a couple of the takeaways is what I'd like to talk about in this pod. And we're not going to go into a lot of specifics because some of that is internal systems that I don't necessarily want to share with the rest of the world. But one of the things that we did do this year was inspired by an article I read in the Wall Street Journal by the founder of Panera, who has used a system called a premortem for many years to plan for how things might fail in the future and then make adjustments so that those things don't happen. And also, in addition to the business premortem, does a personal premortem in that imagines himself at the end of his life and thinks about what is left undone and what he wish he didn't do. And those two components he attributes to his business success. It is a he. And I was intrigued by it because for many, many years I have practiced a postmortem, particularly when things didn't go right. But the idea of using your imagination to engage a premortem, like what possible things could go wrong, and then plan around those things is really intelligent. And so we as a team did that, particularly around end of life imagination. And as they say, nobody gets to the end of their life and wishes they spent more time at the office. But
save that extra $1, right?
I don't know how you feel, Hamish, and I'd love to hear, but I know I love my work. And my goal is to love my work throughout the rest of my working life. And that means making sure we do more of the things we love doing, less of the things we don't. Learn to say no when it really isn't beneficial. And you've seen personally how saying no, and in this case,
opens doors.
It always opens doors. It may sound like magical thinking, but it always opens doors. How did you feel about the premortem? Postmortem? Premortem. Premortem.
It was kind of an interesting exercise. As far as like from a personal standpoint and looking at my own life, I was pretty happy to kind of imagine myself there, but at the same time, I think I'm fairly young, and so I don't necessarily have maybe all of my values or what really impacts me super closely figured out. So it was a fun exercise, and it definitely stimulated a lot of thinking. The few days afterwards, I was kind of still organizing it in my head and what makes sense and everything. And today, actually, I reviewed the notes from there, and they all kind of fit. It's a lot of it kind of going back to family, ensuring the work that I do is good and up to kind of like personal standards as well. Am I just putting it out there, or am I really happy and stoked to stand behind it as well? So it was a really fun exercise. You did kind of like this meditative like voice coach through it, which I thought was kind of fun. You read us through the script or whatever for it, which was a lot of fun. But also seeing the team's kind of realizations, or maybe they already knew, but seeing the team's outlooks and opinions on it as well. Sophie and yours was that provided a lot of color for me. Seeing what everybody else kind of took from it and going from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
There's the discussion part. Yeah.
The business side of it was for me, one of the realizations was making sure that our mission, right, our motto that we say all the time, our goal is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. That's not just it's not just something we blaze on the wall and forget about. And even though that is the spirit of everything we do, I feel like there's always room for improvement to our systems. And having a little bit of time to think about that was really beneficial. And systems for buyers, which include our due diligence checklist, but being more proactive with that rather than waiting for clients to express concerns over due diligence. There's no reason we can't be the ones pushing and creating the opportunity with a kickoff meeting as a system. And for the sellers, I'll just give you a simple example, right, of being smarter about real estate decisions. And we do this most of the time. But every once in a while, when we're super busy, suddenly we forget to mention it. And that is a really simple thing. If you are selling your house and it was built before 1980, even if it was built after 1980, it's a really good idea to get your sewer lines routered. Yeah. Because a lot of those lines from the 50s and 60s were clay pipe, and the clay pipe comes in sections, and in between the sections, root intrusion occurs. That's the normal condition of clay pipe, and it needs to be cleaned on a regular basis. And people forget about it for long periods of time, and sometimes the house has been vacant for a while, and what ends up happening is the roots build up, and there's other debris that the roots catch. And when the guy, it is usually a guy,
the inspector,
when the person goes in to scope the line, the inspector, they can't get through it, and they report that the sewer line has an obstruction, which for a lot of but for a lot of buyers that freaks them out. Like the idea of a sewer backup in this asset they're spending their life savings on in many cases to acquire, the idea that sewer material, sewage as it's called, is backing up into their house is like nightmare, right? So this is so easily avoided. The cost for a good sewer scope is $200. Don't do the $99 people, by the way. Do the pay for a reputable company. We have a great one that we refer constantly because he's so good, which I thought one sewer rooter is the same as another sewer rooter. Yeah, right. It's not. Those discount people make their money by recommending you do work that you really don't need. And that work is tens of thousands of dollars because you're panicked in that moment, and that's their moment to stick you with a big estimate. So so the system, and what I'm trying to get to, should be the checklist. Have you had your line scoped, or have you had it routed recently? And if not, we strongly advise you do that now, before the inspections are scheduled, so that when the inspector slides the scope through the sewer line, they can cleanly inspect it. If there's a dislocation, they're going to see it. Okay, they're going to see it whether or not you cleaned the sewer line. Because eventually so what happens if you don't and the inspector can't get through is they will then ask you to clean the line, and if they're smart, they'll also ask you to pay for the rescope because they've already paid for it once, and this is really your fault that they couldn't investigate the line. So this actually saves you quite a bit of money to just scope it, just router it in advance. You don't necessarily need to scope it.
And that's I think you already summarized it, but if you have an inspection and the buyer comes back and says, well, we couldn't inspect the whole line because it was obstructed, then you just have this kind of continuation of events, and your contingencies get delayed, and it kind of creates not tension, but it makes the process a little bit more strenuous. It's already super emotional. It's already got a million steps to go through as both a buyer and a seller. So if you get ahead of it, you're proactive, you're not reactive, and it's just a little bit quicker. Plus, you can spot issues prior to the inspection, which might give you a chance to correct a little bit easier, or perhaps save a bit of coin too if the buyer insists on a particular company to make whatever repair ends up needing to be made. So
that's right.
Yeah.
If it turns out there is a problem with the sewer line, you can address it in advance if you scoped it in advance. And we do recommend, in most cases, with some caveats, to pre-inspect your home. To the point where I'll pay for it if you do it, and credit you that at closing as your listing agent. However, it's not always advisable. And before you rush into hiring for a pre-inspection, consult with your agent on the pros and the cons of doing it. And I don't want to go into that now because I want to keep this in 90 minutes. We can't give away too much.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make is one of the things I came away from with the retreat is that we often recommend all sorts of things to our sellers and for sure to our buyers, but we should work a little bit more closely on a checklist of items, particularly at certain deal points. And so that's one of the things that was an aha. We already have a lot of this in play. We've been doing it. Look, we're not rookies. I've been an agent for over 20 years. But systems is how you scale, and systems is also how you don't make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And we Leah and I literally have a checklist that we now use for every trip. We develop a little checklist before we leave, and then we're like pilots in the vehicle before we drive off. Like we're going, and I'm like, there's 2 checkboxes. There's one checkbox for initially gathered. There's another checkbox for verified. Nice. We saw it go into the vehicle. Yeah. And so it's really funny when we do it. I'm like, okay, we got to it's a weird discipline, but let's take 5 minutes before we leave to make sure that we go through this checklist. The checklists live in Google Drive. And they evolve with every trip. Super easy to do, but that system saves a lot of heartbreak.
Yeah, like I don't want to run this podcast, right? Like we're keeping it to 90, but it keeps your practice focused, and it keeps you improving on something that works, that you've worked through, and I'm stoked. Every time we have a team retreat, we go back and look at systems or find a new system, and they just incrementally all get better and better. Pretty soon, I'm really excited to see what things look like in 2 or 3 years even.
Well, the last thing I want to mention, Hamish, and I appreciate you keeping us on time and mentioning the 90 minutes again.
That's going to be the theme.
And that is that for many years, our follow-up system after closing, frankly, has sucked. And the reason it has sucked is because it has felt like the available or recommended systems are disingenuous and awkward and feel very transactional. So agents will, sign up for Constant Contact. They'll send automated postcards. Some agents will go around delivering pies at Thanksgiving, which if you've been doing this as long as I've been doing it, that's a lot of pies and a lot of like, how are you going to do that? Like in 24 hours? Yeah. You can't. And so there are agents that do various things. For many years, I did an anniversary letter, which was an analysis of the comps and a reminder of when you bought it, and then an expression of gratitude. And that was okay, but it also felt a little disconnected. I had an assistant at the time helping write them because
I came across them today, actually.
They needed things to do, and that was something they could help me do, and I trained them to look up comps, and they could kind of boilerplate it. But it also didn't feel authentic. Mm-hmm. And what I'm really excited about, and I'm not going to go into details on it, is an aha that came from our dialogue around a great follow-up system that is authentic, is meaningful, connects with people as humans, and isn't really any longer than it would take to send a text message. So that sounds really exciting, and I'm playing with it right now with my friends circle, just to see how it works out, just socially. And I think I'm going to be rolling it out as the first quarter rolls out with all of the closings, just to see how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing that can happen is somebody gets a text or gets this thing from me, and they haven't heard from me for 5 years, and suddenly they're getting this from me, maybe that'll feel a little weird, but I'm okay with that. Better than
you can even address it in the follow-up.
Maybe. All right, that's enough. I don't want to go in, and I don't want to give our competition ideas.
Exactly. Yep.
I do have personal adventure written here in our retreat takeaways. I'm going to save that for the Carveout.
Perfect. I've got a little point in here, and it's really just you think of like work retreats, and at least in my mind, I think like big corporate and kind of impersonal and constant work and bleh work. But yeah, sure, it's in a different spot. But our team retreats are awesome. We have really kind of everybody in the team is pretty dang close. Like we get along very well, and it allows for a lot of really open discussions around topics that are kind of more sensitive, and it gets us to conclusions and kind of courses of action that I don't think we'd otherwise get there. It's really awesome that we get along, and we're able to have some fantastic conversations around work, around personal life, and it's a good team. I don't want to sound too pat on the back or anything like that, but yeah, it's great to align.
I particularly like that the team feels comfortable enough to challenge me, and that we can have honest discussion. Like I'm okay being wrong, and I encourage people to speak up when they feel that I am wrong, and I actually love it when people are like, no, that doesn't sound right, and here's why. And for example, and I won't go into detail, but they said like there was one thing that came up, and I was like, well, we should just do this as a practice, and the team was like, that doesn't feel right to do that, and I was like, huh. Yeah. And it comes down to well, it's the principle we're violating. And sure enough, we were violating a principle. So, I don't know, I'm really proud of the fact we have a team where people feel comfortable and are empowered to share their honest opinions. And we go pretty deep on those retreats. So that's a fantastic thing.
Absolutely. You got to bring this one in. Yep. Let me mark the time code.
All right. So we're going to talk about Trump. And I don't really want to talk about Trump. I'll be completely honest. I feel like everyone else is talking about Trump, so you don't need us to talk about Trump.
But with that said,
with that said, we can't ignore it because it is so impactful that ignoring it feels very tone deaf. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I'm going to open this by saying that there are many people in our local community, among our colleagues, our clients, our friends, and our family members who are experiencing incredible fear and anxiety right now. And it seems mostly related to the executive order around only identifying male and female on federal matters, federal forms, the federal government will only recognize male and female sexes, will no longer recognize genders. And it has been very triggering of a very deep-seated fear of people in the LGBTQ community that they are going to see their rights eroded, and they're going to see an increase in harassment. And given how Trump seems to encourage those that harbor prejudice, seems to empower those people to speak up and say inappropriate and rude things, I think that some of these fears are legitimate. And so I'm recognizing that. I'm hearing a lot about the fears of people that we care about deeply, and their anxiety and fears are spiking because of what's going on due to Trump. And there's a lot of other things to talk about, and we're going to talk about the housing market impact too. But I really wanted to mention that up front and acknowledge that, and also reiterate that our mission is to help people be smart about real estate decisions, but we also believe very firmly in having a safe place for our clients and our friends and our colleagues and our family members, creating that no matter their income levels, no matter their gender, their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their gender expression, or even their politics on either side of the aisle or any area of the spectrum of politics, with a little caveat I'll get to. And I'll also mention that I have represented multiple clients that I don't agree with their politics, and they know they don't agree with mine. But they also recognize that has nothing to do...
Keeps the topic on real estate, right?
We focus on real estate and don't start talking about local politics because we're not aligned.
I tend to be I'd rather not see lots of development, and I don't want to see our city turn into a high-density city. That's called Denver, 30 miles to the south, and those people make fun of that. And that conflict, I'm okay with not having agreement with everybody on all things, and also recognizing our mission is to serve. Now, the only little caveat to that is that if your perspectives involve incredible prejudice, and you share that, or we know that about you, we're unlikely to take you as a client because of that. And I'll share the story. It's really brief. Just in the early phases of my real estate career, a woman asked me to represent her in managing her properties. And I said, well, tell me more. And she goes, well, I've got multiple apartments and condos, and this is not in the Boulder market, by the way. This is in Massachusetts. And she said to me, there's just one thing. I don't want you to rent to any black people. And I said, what? She said, yeah, I just don't want any black people in my properties. And I said, no, thank you. I think that I'm not interested in working with you. And also, now that I knew this about her, I was not interested in having any sort of friendship with this person who was a blatant racist. And even ignoring fair housing law, okay? So in my opinion, laws are things that are put in place for good reasons most of the time, but they don't necessarily govern ethical behavior, and ethics and morality come before the law. So if something is legal but it's unethical and immoral, I'm not going to do it. If something, the legality is irrelevant. What this person was asking me to do was just wrong, and so if you have those types of attitudes that are blatantly racist and prejudiced, I think you should find somebody else. But if
we'll let
flexible,
you know. I mean, shoot, yeah.
I mean, is that hard to say? If you're flexible, and you're like, for example, I tend to be fiscally conservative but pretty liberal when it comes to belief around what people should be doing. Maybe also to call myself borderline libertarian, but officially independent. I'm not libertarian. I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Democrat. But we're glad to serve Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Independents, Green Party members. And pick your political party. That's totally fine. And I just want to mention that to be clear, and come back to, particularly right now, the need to help people have safe spaces where they know that they are among people that are not going to be discriminatory towards them because of what they look like, or who they choose to love, or what their bodies look like, or any of those things. They're just not even part of how we operate.
Yeah, that's not us. I think well said. You brought it up. I'm also registered independent.
Okay. All right. Anyway. So now let's thank you for sharing. And I mean, I don't know if you have anything to add about the safe space concept. I think it's important. But let's move on.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah. Nothing to add? Okay. Let's talk about the housing market impacts of the Trump administration. In particular, 3 areas that I think are very likely to see a significant impact. The first and most immediate is going to be in our labor costs, particularly if these immigration raids turn out to be real. Because a large portion of the construction industry and a large percentage of the labor is labor that is likely undocumented. Particularly the lower skilled, like you often see this in landscaping companies, where employers don't ask a lot of questions on who's getting paid, how they're getting paid. And
super subcontracted kind of industries, right?
Absolutely. You have no idea who's actually doing the labor. And immigrants are an incredible asset to this country in many ways, but taking the undocumented portion, which is likely to be a significant portion from the construction industry, out in a very rapid way. If all those workers stay home, your labor costs are not going to get lower. They're going to go higher, much higher. So it's an unknown. It's just completely unknown what percentage of impact is going to be felt by increased labor costs, but we're going to see increased labor costs. And the tariffs, so this is the second piece, tariffs. There's a huge component of new construction as well as remodels and as well as just home improvement and home ownership, right?
Yeah.
Just things wear out. Appliances and electronics are largely not manufactured within the United States, and 10% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, or 50% tariffs on China, whatever is being bantied about
the day.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's likely political maneuvering because that's what Trump does. He overstates and then negotiates. He very much understands the concept of anchoring, which is something we do in real estate negotiations too. But his anchoring is always like throw out some crazy number and then negotiate back from that. So we'll see. Although I guess not always. Sometimes he actually does what he's saying. So expect large increases in appliances, electronics, fixtures, light fixtures, you name it. All sorts of stuff is going to get more expensive, and that's going to result in higher new homes, higher cost to new homes, higher cost to remodels,
products, right? Goods,
the products, all those goods are going to get more expensive. And then the last piece is really uncertain, and that is in regard to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and the very large entities known as Fannie and Freddie, and Sally actually too. So these pseudo-government entities that underlie the mortgage market, that buy and repackage and securitize mortgages, are the reason our borrowing rates have been so low compared to the rest of the world when it comes to mortgages. And we also have 30-year fixed rate mortgages, and most other countries don't have those, right?
Found that out recently, yeah.
So if Fannie and Freddie are IPO'd, right, are no longer pseudo-governmental organizations but are public companies, do you think it's likely that mortgage costs are going to increase? I think that it's going to be similar to the difference between Medicare and Medicaid and private insurance when it comes to the cost. And if you study the healthcare market, it's pretty clear that the middle players in insurance are adding costs, not reducing costs. That the government's actually pretty efficient at keeping costs down for common medical procedures for those that qualify. So I think the same thing is going to happen with Fannie and Freddie when they're spun off, is that it's going to get more expensive because no longer is their mission to provide.
It's not really for the people anymore, right? Yeah.
It's for the profit. And if it's for the profit, they can do also, their mission is to maximize profit for their shareholders, not maximize benefit for the country. So I hope it doesn't get spun out, but we will see. And those are the three big areas. Did you think there's anything we're missing from?
I think, and I'm just saying stuff. It's a podcast. But the Fannie, Freddie, Sally spinoff, it to me rings a bell similar to people saying that like the USPS should be privatized or IPO'd, and it's like, well, yeah, but the USPS also has services that don't make a profit for a reason, because they're more for the people than they are to make a profit. I see a parallel there, but I'm not entirely sure if it's a full one. There's government services that maybe shouldn't be profitable, but I don't know how. Yeah,
there's certain industries that are allowed to have a monopoly, and the energy markets, for example, we have Excel. You can't hire anybody but Excel, and we have a regulator that forces Excel to justify their cost increases. So this model of business is cost plus pricing, and they are incentivized to make everything as expensive as possible for themselves because they also thereby maximize their profit. This is the problem with sort of the middle ground, where you have a private but regulated, a public company that's regulated, but it has a monopoly. And in the mortgage markets, Fannie and Freddie effectively have a monopoly. And you can see the difference in cost if you try to go to a portfolio loan with a regional lender. None of the regional lenders are going to be signing you up for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. If you're lucky, you might get a 15, but more typically they're only willing to do adjustable rate, 5-year adjustable rate. Like they'll do a 15-year AM or a 30-year AM, but the rate adjusts in 5 years. And that's to protect them and their investors.
Yeah. So, we shall see on that topic. Who knows? The rhetoric and kind of the promise here or this here, we could doom it in worst case, or we could go, well, sometimes he doesn't follow through, and so this might not happen. But this is kind of Right, like our little snapshot and what we've heard thrown around and kind of our expectations or thoughts on if these things pass through, right?
I mean, there were already impacts in December and November. The moment it was clear he had won and tariffs were likely, there's a reason you're flying a brand new drone.
Yep.
We didn't need to buy it in December because I was pretty convinced that, if not just tariffs, but maybe an outright ban on new DJI products hitting the shores. So lots of market impacts to real estate that are likely to happen. And of course, lots and lots of other impacts with all of the executive orders that Donald Trump has issued and will continue to issue. And
busy
we're
day
gonna
one.
See lots of stories, particularly in the immigrant community and the LGBTQ community. And I think these stories are going to be painful to read and watch. And also, as we think about those that are experiencing these things, it's important to be practicing compassion and empathy, because we do have deep concern for our friends, our colleagues, our clients, our family members, our community. Our community. So that's where we are on the situation. And as much as I like the idea of an efficient government, and there are some things I like that Trump is bringing to bear, this is definitely something I feel awful about, and I don't know what to do. And Leah and I have talked about it, and I think we'll be making a donation to Out Boulder, and also be on the lookout and be willing to be present for those that are experiencing fear and anxiety, or in reality are experiencing discrimination, or being deported. We're likely to hear all sorts of stories in the coming months.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on? That's a heavy one. Boy,
on that super positive, gleaming note, market conditions, Osmond.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some benefits too, by the way. Okay, and I think that I am an optimist.
That's the idea, right? You know,
I am an optimist. I think as an entrepreneur, and in particular a real estate entrepreneur, you better be optimistic, and that means looking for the silver linings. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have you shouldn't acknowledge what's happening that's hurting people. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Market conditions. Let's go into it. You can mark the time now, Hamish. I'll say it one more time. Ready?
Okay.
Let's move on with market conditions.
Can you hear the clickety-clack of my keyboard?
Of course.
Talk about rusty. I didn't bring my notepads, so I can handwrite in the timecodes. Yeah.
Shall we pause for a second?
Oh, you're good to go.
Okay. Market conditions. And this is going to be brief. We just looked at December data for Boulder County single-family houses. And remember, December is a thinly traded month, so it's hard to read too much into this. It's more relevant when we have 2 to 3 months worth of data to look back on. So we saw 14% more houses that were available for sale. So inventory was 14% higher in December compared to a year ago. No surprise. Pending sales, there was virtually no change year over year. 149 pending sales this year, 148 last year for the month of December. Again, single-family houses. And then 27% increase in sales volume. So that was a bit of a surprise to see a bit of a pop there. But it's not uncommon for the thinly traded months to have high volatility because they're thinly traded. So the smaller the volume is in the data set, the more likely you see large increases. But 27% increase in sales is a positive sign. And then the bottom line is that it's still too early to know how next year is going to shape up. We are sadly looking at a world that is going to see higher rates more likely than lower rates. But it might be anyone's guess with all of the changes that are coming into play with the Trump administration. Back to Trump again. We're in a very uncertain time. And what's interesting is that there's a price associated in the markets with risk and uncertainty. It's a price that you see reflected very quickly in individual stocks, but it's not something you see reflected very quickly in real estate prices. Real estate is very slow moving. And so you really have to evaluate it both big picture in the thought process that is this market really if you're buying, is there a chance the market's going to be substantially lower next year with better inventory? If you're selling, same question. Is it better to sell now this year, or should you wait? And all of that is going to depend on price range, location, all of the things we talk about over and over again. Property type, condition, neighborhoods, down to the street level, down to the side of the street. We just helped a client go through this analysis. And he's closing this week, and we'll talk about that deal next week. But
cool.
One of the things that helped convince him was to look back over the last 12 months and ask how many other similar condition units were available for sale and closed. And the answer was effectively none, not in this price range. To get what he was buying and his closing on, it was one of the lower priced. Everything new or newer was 50, 100, 150,000 more expensive. So that helped him feel some confidence. We also talked. We'll talk about that deal next week. But there's a bunch of interesting aspects to that deal.
I was gonna say, you're not. What's going on, Osman? You're not saying now is the best time to buy and sell.
It might be the best time to buy or sell, but you don't make that
comes
conclusion.
down to you. Yeah.
It comes down to the market and your situation. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I'm just laughing at other agents going, now's a great time. Do both.
I mean, now's a really good time to start to interview agents. Now's a good time to start to understand the market, to study the market. Now's a good time to meet with somebody that, like us, cares about making a smart decision, and they're more than happy to help educate you on market conditions, not based on their ego or their. I've been in the business 20 years. I've closed 1,000 real estate deals, which an agent told me the other day with such pomp. With such puffery that I just looked at him and I tried not to laugh. I mean, my face gives it away how I feel. That's I got to be careful because I want to do a deal. I've done deals
expression.
with him.
Yeah.
But just his sense of I'm the authority because I've done so many deals and some crazy number he throws out there. I'm sorry, the market changes and you got to look at the comps. You got to look at the big picture. You got to look at the trend. You got to look at very specifically what does the market look like for what you're trying to achieve. Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, shameless self-promo.
It's time for shameless self-promotion.
Yeah.
And now just are you typing it, Hamish? You're making notes on the time codes out loud.
Yeah. We're getting more and more progressively meta. Yeah.
Yeah. Shameless self-promotion. So this is the little segment of our podcast where we share a little tidbit, a little morsel, a little detail about a deal that we might be working on or a buyer that might be searching for a property. And we will talk about our little listing that is currently available in Shanahan Ridge. This is 3707 Telluride. So Shanahan Ridge is a development of mostly townhomes that have a variety of layouts, and they were all built in the 70s, but they are positioned right up against Shanahan open space, and it is stunningly beautiful open space. It also is a very easy bike ride or hike down to Veely Lake and the South Boulder Rec Center and the shopping plaza at Fairview High School, and the schools in South Boulder are fantastic. And these properties have something you would never do today as a developer. It has plenty of interior open space and beautiful natural light. The downside, of course, is that these units were developed in the 70s, so many of them have not been updated, and some of the oldest ones even have these ancient these ancient stoves in them that were secondary heat sources. They are set up with electric baseboard originally, and they're not very energy efficient. Our unit that's for sale has been thoroughly updated, includes mini splits on the walls, so those are a form of heat pump. And the unit, so that's heating and cooling. The kitchen's been updated. The floors have been updated. It's just a lovely property. It has a main level bedroom that we have staged as a primary, and then it has two large bedrooms on the upper levels. On the
One
upper
with an
level,
ensuite
singular,
and a balcony. Yeah.
With an ensuite and a balcony. And if you rewind the clock to 2020 and 2021, these properties were getting bidding wars. You couldn't get one because of how much demand there was. it checks the box for a wide variety of potential buyers. A young couple that is planning on a family could use this as their entry-level house. It's also a great downsizing home because it has the little garage. The exterior is generally maintained by the HOA. They deal with the plowing of the driveway. They take care of things, and you are more free to enjoy not maintaining all the stuff you normally would maintain with a single-family home. There's only one attached wall. I've met that neighbor several times, and I've talked to the owners about whether there's much noise transfer. They say they never hear each other, but that, of course, is a due diligence item for buyers to check out. But this property is fantastic. It's also priced right. It's well-maintained. It's a really lovely place, and we're doing a little refresh in terms of photography. We're going to be bringing it out with some new photos shortly. And if you haven't checked it out and you're looking for something that's priced reasonably in South Boulder, you should go take a look at this one.
3707 Telluride Circle.
That's right. 3707 Telluride Circle.
Yeah.
All right, we are talking about sales of the week. And this is the segment of the podcast where we discuss recent sales. They are usually within the past week, but sometimes they are a little older. And because they're closed, we can discuss them on the pod. If they were active listings, the only place I can discuss them is with you personally as a client. You can pick up the phone and call me if you are a client or a potential client. Or if it happens to have caught my eye during the month, I may write about it in our client newsletter. And that newsletter is at houseeinstein.com. It costs nothing to sign up. And if you want a taste for what we do with our clients with active listings, with pros and cons of each listing, check out houseeinstein.com and sign up for the newsletter. But you won't get to be able to ask me about your specific real estate. You'll just have to put up with whatever I think is interesting to write about that month. And it is a monthly newsletter that we generally put out throughout the year. But if things get a little busy in the summertime, there may be some delays. Clients are first, always. Yeah. So if there's a delay in the newsletter, the reason is I'm busy with clients, and maybe I'm also attending a sibling reunion, and on both sides of the family this year, within 2 weeks. That was nuts. But family matters, so you have to pay attention to those things. So that's the newsletter. Let's talk about the sales of the week.
Where are we
starting? The first one. I almost said let's talk about fresh listings. Fresh listings is the name of the newsletter. All right, let's talk about sales of the week. 2235 Knollwood Drive is our first sale. And this property is in a really interesting little spot. It is currently unincorporated Boulder County. They have, for years, threatened to annex Knollwood. It is just west of Mapleton Hill and just south of the trail access to Mount Sanitas. In fact, people sometimes drive into Knollwood trying to find a place to park. It has seen, one of the negatives is that when you pull out of this neighborhood, you're going to run smack into all that crazy traffic, pedestrians, cyclists, folks that live at the academy and all the staff. All of that, it's a very busy spot just on the exit of Knollwood. But otherwise, it's a fantastic location. And the price points are what you'd expect for just up against open space, west of 4th Street, steps away from downtown Boulder, steps away from Mount Sanitas.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in prime territory. One of the drawbacks is, the traffic. One of the other drawbacks is that sometimes in the summer, you will get transients or people experiencing homelessness or volunteer outdoorsmen is what my friend calls them, that live and camp in the little open spaces hidden away, known to the police campsites just north of Pearl and just south of Knollwood. There's a little pocket of activity there, which I'm not sure if that's a factor for the location, but it's something you should know about. And there have been experiences of campfires back there, so that is just something to be aware of. And this particular house was built in... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the fire, back to the open space. It is a reality too.
It is, and if you know homeless people are camping, people experiencing homelessness are camping in that space. It's just something you should be aware of. If it's important to you as a client, it's important to us as your agents. And it's important to me as your agent to mention it so that I did my job helping you do your due diligence. And you can make the decision. My job is not to make those decisions. My job is to bring it to your awareness, things you may not have known. And that is something to know about this location. So this particular house was built in 1989. It's a 4-bedroom, 5-bath. It's pretty generously sized at almost 5,600 square feet. It has a rare 3-car garage, and it's sitting on a 13,000 square foot lot. All of that is super attractive, and the overall marketing of the property looks pretty good. There's nothing wrong there. And the listing agent is an agent, I won't mention her by name, but it's an agent I have a lot of respect for. We've done deals in the past, and she's rock solid. She does her analysis. She's deeply experienced. She is somebody that I would consider a respected colleague. And she listed the house at 4.2 in July. And in July, that number may have been market. And we saw the same thing happening with our listings beginning in June, that the prices started skidding down and sideways and down throughout the summer. So it started life at 4.2 million in July. And about 40 days later, almost 50 days later, they dropped the price to 3.9. Now remember, as we've shared with you multiple times on the pod, anything above 3 had horrific competition this year. It was 100% a buyer's market above 3 last year. And they dropped it to 3.9, but there were still no takers. It didn't go under contract. And then about another 45 days later, the price dropped from 3.9 to 3.5. And finally, right around Thanksgiving, they found a buyer. And this was with the last list price of 3.5. And that deal just closed on January 8th for $3,061,000. So you're looking at over 1.1 million below their initial list price. And not an uncommon story at the high end, and maybe also a story of the opportunities you sometimes see in the fourth quarter, particularly right around Thanksgiving all the way to the end of the year. Sellers who have been on the market a long time, have owned their home for a long time, would like to get out, and they sometimes capitulate. And a discount of 440,000 roughly from the last list, which is over 10% from the last list price, and well over $1 million from the original list price. That's a phenomenal readjustment.
It's on the pod,
of expectations, right? That's something that. That it's not the agent, okay? This is the market. It also may have had some functional issues with the house. The kitchen was pretty dated. I mean, the house had some... So here's the thing, right? You're going to list a home that's north of $3 million. You're going to list a home north of $4 million. It better be dialed into the T's. You are competing with the best real estate, and you are also dealing with buyers who have price flexibility. In economics, this is called elasticity of demand. Or is it price elasticity of demand? Oh boy. I think it's just elasticity of demand. But that basically what it means is a buyer for this house could also be a buyer for a $5 million house, right? But a buyer for a home that's $800,000 is unlikely to have that sort of flexibility. They're likely only looking from $750 to $900. But a buyer at the $3 million level could be looking at $5 million, $6 million as well. And you're competing with homes that just should be dialed into the nines. And when I look at this kitchen and the backsplash and it just looks very...
It's pretty, but it's not like the wow factor, right?
It looks clinical. Yeah. It looks like tile. It just doesn't look... There's no color, and it looks... the spacing looks gigantic, right, in the kitchen. Like, it almost looks awkward in the way the kitchen is.
Like
so
too
kitchens
large?
And bathrooms... imagine like where it looks very vacant. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it looks like the spacing is wrong. Some people call this the magic triangle. The fridge, the dishwasher, and the stove are supposed to be within like a step away from each other. It's just, there's something off. And I think had they spent $150,000 or $200,000 freshening that kitchen, or even less. Just replace the tile, bring in some color. It probably would have helped a little bit. But overall, those types of quibbles, we don't know if the seller was willing to do it. And frequently sellers are not. I mean, the history of Boulder real estate is sellers are often very reluctant to do updates. And even though we often recommend them and have contractors to help you accomplish that quickly, most clients don't want to do it. They feel like they're throwing money away on a house they're selling. And unfortunately, depending on price range and location, and $3 million plus is that price range and location, price range. And this location is nice, but it's not the best location in the world. It's great. Don't get me wrong. It has caveats, which I've already shared. It would have been better if they had spent more money in terms of making the place look more appealing and updating it before listing it. And the agent, again, is somebody we really enjoy doing business with, somebody that I have a lot of respect for. So this is not about the agent. This is about a pattern, particularly at the high end of the market in Boulder real estate. Go ahead, Hamish.
I was saying it's more about kind of preparation, pre-list.
This is one of the reasons we do a staging consultation, where we ask them too, are you willing to spend money? If their answer is no, then the staging consultation reflects, I don't want to spend any money. Mm-hmm. But if the answer is yes, I'm willing to spend some money to get this place right, and they reach out to us early enough, right? If you're reaching out to us in June or July and you want to list right away, there's no time. Yeah. But if you're reaching out to us in November, December, January, February, March, there's enough time for us to get cosmetics done for sure. New tile. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. And make a really
compelling listing. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that we do is run this through our whole team so they can also offer their thoughts. And almost always I have feedback from one or more members of the team that I didn't notice.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons the photos are so important, the pre-listing photos. Okay.
We're going to have to be a little quicker on the next ones.
Okay. So 548 a square, by the way, is where that ended up. And that was 2235 Knollwood.
Okay.
563 Locust Place. So this is a different story. Let's start with location. This property is just north of Wonderland Lake, just south of Foothills Community Park. It's tucked away quite a bit to the west, and it is south-facing on Locust. All of those things are positive. Fantastic location. Wonderland Lake has, in particular Foothills Community Park, has some of the most eye-popping views of any open space in Boulder. It also isn't overrun with random tourists because it's not close to downtown. It's not as popular as Sanitas. It also it doesn't have the random people camping in the open space there. So it's
kind
a fantastic.
A secret.
Yeah. It's not a secret if you've lived here 20 years and been on every.
But it's a local favorite.
It's a local favorite. It's a location you should know about. And here you have a house built in the 80s that is over 4,000 square feet with a 2-car attached garage. It has 5 bedrooms, 4 of which are on the upper level, which is important. 1 of which is in the basement or lower level. And it has 5 bathrooms, 8,000 square foot lot, which is slightly more than typical. And even though it's a multi-level house, not a classic 2-story, it's going to function effectively like a 2-story. And it's sold right away. So the listing agent, who of course we also know, I think they priced it pretty accurately, given market conditions, and they listed it. They listed it in November, which we usually don't recommend listing late into the fourth quarter. I would have told these sellers, do you really need to list it in the fourth quarter? We better be really aggressive on price. But even so, they listed it at 2.6 or 2.595, if you will. It was on the market about 2 weeks, and a buyer swooped in, and they managed to negotiate $70,000 off the list price, which is straight up the fairway as a percentage. We can do the math, Hamish, really quick. Let me do it really fast, see if it matches what I think it should be. 2,525 over 2,595 minus 1. It's 2.7%, right in that 1 to 3% negotiated discount range for a well-priced listing. And boom, it sold, and it closed January 9th. When you look at, so when I think about a house, I always think about what percentage of buyers are going to be interested in a house like this. And given the location, the property type, under $3 million, right in the 2.5 range, reasonable size, good bedroom and bath count, 2-car attached garage. Like, that is 90% of buyers are going to find those characteristics what they're looking for. Some people might say 4,000 is too big, but most people are going to say that's perfect. I have an office for me. I have an office for my primary partner. I have extra bedrooms for guest rooms, a workout room, or maybe we have kids, or maybe we have an in-law suite in the basement. There's all sorts of things, and it was built in the 80s, so you're past lead-based paint and asbestos. Late 80s, you shouldn't have asbestos in the house. All that looks great. More energy efficient in the late 80s too, and so I, without even looking at the interior photos, all of that makes it desirable. And then you pop into the photos and you see a home that's been well taken care of and has some nice updates. The fireplace wall, the kitchen, it looks tasteful. Like, you wouldn't be embarrassed bringing friends and family, clients, your boss over for dinner, and you have really nice views to the open space. Like, this just checked so many boxes. So I'm not surprised it sold very quickly, and congratulations to the listing agent and to the buying agent and to the sellers. I think that deal worked out very well for you. And if your agent said, hey, you got a good deal, that worked out, and you're not sure, you're hearing it independently that was a very good deal. That worked out.
Yeah. Nice. On to the next.
Oh, hold on. There was an $11,000 concession, by the way, likely related, almost $12,000, likely related to inspection, but unknown for what that was. All right, let's move on.
This one,
as Hamish alluded, this one I took a personal interest in, 3950 57th Street. And we originally had shown this house to a client way back in 2022, maybe 2023. Originally it listed at 6.25 in June of 2022. And by the end of the year, they had dropped the price. Actually, after only a few weeks, they dropped it to 5.8. And then in October, they dropped it to, same year, I apologize. They pulled it off the market and then back on the market. And I'm getting a little confused with these dates.
My price history looks weird on here too.
It's totally weird. It's like they had two listings going at the same time. So it eventually, before the end of the year, they had dropped it to 4.45. So a couple things. First, when you see somebody list a home and then rapidly decrease the price by huge percentages, it signals a lack of confidence in your pricing, right? Like, you would think that if you know the value of your home, you're not cutting the price that quickly,
or
unless there's some urgency to get this thing sold. But this is sort of guess the price, make-believe pricing, wishful thinking was the approach to pricing this. Now, with that said, okay, so the house itself, let's go to the details of the house. It is a home built in the early 80s, 4,000 square feet, 4-car detached garage. Wait a minute. There's an attached and detached garage. Okay,
it's like I'm seeing three structures, yeah.
The other structure is sort of a pool housey looking thing. Mm-hmm. And I went and looked at this property with a client. What attracted us was its potential, and the fact it was sitting on 15 acres of land, and the fact it had water rights.
Wow. 4 structures.
Let me verify the water rights, because that's memory, and I'm pretty sure it does. Agricultural ditch water. Where's the word water rights? I see the agricultural... This is memory, and we're rushing through it. It has a well. Where's the water rights? That was the thing that captured my attention. And it's not on this MLS because it's probably Colorado. Yeah. So I'm about 90% sure that there were water rights involved as well. And so the listing just sold for 2.15. And we showed it to clients, and this was back when it was in, I don't know, the 4s. And their conclusion was that it needs over $1 million of updates and maybe just needs to be torn down and start over. And we felt sort of the same way. The bones, like, it felt like it had potential in its foundation and maybe some of the bones, but it needed to be completely gutted and redone. It was kind of musty smelling inside, which was concerning that there might be a water issue. And the layout was really funky, but our client decided to pass on it. And fast forward another year, we're now into 2023. The price dropped into the 3s. Still no takers. And fast forward to this past year, 2024. So remember, this is a 2-year experience in listing the property so far. It went beyond 2 years because the original listing was June of 2022. So June of 2024, 2 years later, still not selling. The price, they're still playing the guess the price game, and the price had dropped to just under $3 million. And by November of this year, they had dropped the price to 2.5. And that's when I messaged
That's when you noticed, yeah.
Yeah, my wife, and I said, we need to go look at this thing because it's been on the market a very long time. And they are probably reaching absolute capitulation level. And land alone is worth the list price. And can we make this house work for us? Like we could scratch our pennies together and buy this thing. We probably would have to sell the home we're in now to make the numbers work, but we could probably make this work. So we went and looked at it again, and we were very close to writing an offer, in my head anyway. I don't know if Leo was as close as I was, because the house is such a downgrade from the one we're in now, which is so well built and so nicely designed, thanks to the seller who designed it and had it built for himself, an engineer at Ball. But the house had those 15 acres. The risk factors were things like the airport and airport noise and what's likely to happen with airport redevelopment. But the way the house was situated next to open space, all of these things check so many boxes. And I slightly regret not pulling the trigger.
It is 8 shares of that ditch, too.
Yeah, thank you for finding it. I knew it had ditch shares. So all sorts of interesting things. We did go into the shop barn space to check it out, and there was mouse droppings everywhere. I mean, the house was frankly not being maintained or taken care of in any way, in my opinion, and that was really hurting its resale potential. So all sorts of problems with the listing, right? Like they should have had it all cleaned up, and they did not. It had lots of seller possessions in it, and they left a lot of money on the table. If it had been properly prepared for sale and maintained throughout the listing, I think you're looking at $500,000 at least in lost value, in my professional opinion. Okay, and I'll be clear about that. So please don't come sue me. This is an opinion. I think that there was lots of opportunity to market this right from the get-go, and it just wasn't done. And finally, the seller capitulated. Our offer would have been below this number, but we anticipated it closing closer to 2. So the buyer they went higher than I thought the seller would be willing to drop to. And at the end of the day, even 2.15, this is a home I hope they take care of and I hope they love for many years. I hope they redevelop it. The land and the view corridor to the Flatirons, the proximity to downtown, and the price point right around $2 million is frankly a home run for this buyer. So they killed it. I don't know the buyer's agent. I don't know the listing agent. And all I can say is that what an amazing deal for the buyer, and also what a lesson for potential sellers. Even if you have a home that's surrounded by open space, even if you have 15 acres of land and water rights, you really should prepare your home properly for sale, and you should market it to the best of your ability. And you should be tracking it throughout the listing history and maintaining it throughout the listing history. People are very emotionally impacted. I can tell you if the barn had not been full of mouse poop, okay, there was a much higher chance we would have written an offer. But my wife's reaction to it was real estate is emotional. Yeah. And we would have been living in this house, right? And it just felt like if it's just being this neglected, what else is wrong? That musty smell we couldn't get our head around, and the layout between the lower level and the upper level, we were trying to figure out how to fix it in a way that would accommodate our aging parents so that potentially they could stay with us. That was something we were looking at, and all of that was feasible, but it just, that final emotional push over
kind of like stack of negative emotions.
It was like maybe it was until we got to the barn. It was and it's not really a barn. It's a separate building. By the time we got to the shop, we were still in this. Oh, can we make it work? Can we make it work? And then finally, we got to the place that disgusted us, and it was just like, let's just go. It doesn't.
Damn.
It's not worth it. And we were just about to leave for the retreat.
Oh,
well, no, this was before we left. This went under contract It went under contract November 21st. So it wasn't right before we left, but it was right around Thanksgiving, and it just felt like we had so many other things happening that we didn't quite have our ducks in a line. But that really the decision point was the emotions. And this is something that we focus so much attention on as realtors with our sellers. Think about what you're expressing. Think about the way people feel as they walk up to the door and they see deferred maintenance. They see broken concrete. They see peeling paint. How are they feeling walking in? And people are making their decisions in seconds frequently. But if they're not making their decisions in seconds, sometimes they're kind of in the middle and on the fence. And like that outbuilding that was full of mouse poop, it was the final straw that pushed us away from this deal. And this is one of those I'll regret for a long time, but at the same time, it's a lesson for how to market a home and take care of a home throughout the listing period. And guess the price is not how to market a home, by the way. In my opinion, like the comps.
Well, it's the optics, right, that you're kind of signaling to the buyers and the buyer's agents, so...
Yeah, and no offense to the listing agent. I mean, their approach is different than our approach. And my approach is how I would have done it. I would have done it a little differently. And I also would discuss what this signals to the market when you rapidly decrease the price. And the first thing people want to know is what's wrong with the house, especially when it's been on the market that long.
So
okay, Hamish, I know you want to move on, so we're going to skip this fourth property, even though it's really lovely and in Lewis. Okay, we're gonna have to say two things about it. All right, I'm gonna say it really fast, Hamish.
Yep,
this last one is 801 Walnut Street in Louisville, built in 2012. It's a 5-bedroom, 4-bath, 4,700 total square feet. Only a 1-car garage, but steps away from downtown Louisville, which everyone that's ever visited Louisville knows how charming and lovely downtown Louisville is. Also doesn't have the degree of homelessness or transient or student issues that Boulder has. It's only 15 minutes away, maybe 20. Spectacular little town. And this particular house is absolutely lovely. No major issues in its design. And it was priced right, in my opinion. Nope, strike that. It was not priced right. Hold on. They started it at 2.3, and they dropped it to 2.2. Started in June, dropped to 2.2, and then brought it back, took it off, brought it back at 2, just under 2. And when it dropped under the magical 2 number, it very quickly found a buyer. I was under contract, maybe not super fast, but came, 6 weeks later. I'm correcting myself right, left, and center. 6 weeks, it still took 6 weeks. I can't believe it took 6 weeks. And it went under contract. It sold for only $31,000 below list.
Bless you.
But this is the type of house that, again, works for a wide variety of buyers. Reasonable square footage, reasonable bed and bath count. Only deficit is only a 1-car garage. Really close to downtown Louisville.
ADU.
And,
yeah,
ADU. Really nice design. Wraparound front porch. Okay, Louisville. I love Louisville. Someday I might end up in Louisville. I think that might be the right answer. If we come off the mountaintop.
You'd be closer to me, Els.
That's right. That was my
big
goal.
bonus. Yeah, I was gonna say that sells it there. Okay, bring her home.
All right. Whew. In the news, this is our last segment, our second to last segment of the podcast. Hamish, this is like the podcast where I'm like correcting myself. At least the last sale of the week, and now into the in the news, we're gonna have some corrections. So in this segment,
we're rusty. Yeah,
we're a little rusty. I'm a little rusty. We're gonna talk about some stuff that's recently happening with City Council, and we've brought this to your attention before, but I really feel like it's now happening at a speed that's I almost want to say unstoppable. So there's an ordinance that City Council just passed called the Family Friendly Vibrant Neighborhoods Update. And yes, that's a very Orwellian name for an ordinance that will allow more subdivisions on smaller lots, more duplexes and ADUs. The city staff estimate 7,500 additional housing units over an uncertain period of time will be created through this ordinance. and a lot of the neighborhoods are up in arms over it because it means that your neighbor can suddenly put a duplex by right next door.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the city doesn't have a huge choice in the matter given the state level mandate that passed over the summer. We have to reconcile our local laws with the state, but it's also something that is going to have a huge impact on the city of Boulder. The initial ordinance passed in January, I want to say 9th. While we were in New Zealand, I was sharing this with our team, talking about its impact. And then the second reading, they have to have a second reading on February 6th. That's only 2 weeks away, and likely will pass as well. So there's a lot of detail here in the ordinance, in the study packets. We can't cover it all.
Yeah.
Hundreds. We can't cover it all in this podcast. But the impacts we can talk about, which means very likely you're going to have easier permitting to get the ADU or duplex. Some of the larger lots, particularly in RMX1, so RMX1 is one of the least restrictive zoning areas in the city of Boulder. It allows duplexes and ADUs by right. It also has smaller setbacks than the other zoning codes, the lower density zoning codes. The larger lots in RMX1 could become triplexes, could allow for a triplex. So that is something that actually impacts our listing, which is under contract, 605 Alpine. And I don't think that's the intention of the buyer, although we don't really know.
Appear. Yeah.
You never know what people are thinking, but in the future that could easily be scraped down given the size of the lot and given what I've read of the new ordinance and the much smaller lots that are now going to be required to do a duplex or triplex. It might be possible to do a triplex on this property, separately deeded, and sell 3 separate units on the same lot. We shall see. And if this topic interests you, the second reading of the ordinance in council, which will be a Zoom call meeting because our city council meetings get so disrupted, will be on February 6th.
Yeah.
Okay. The other bit of development news, I'm going through these fast.
No, you're nailing it. Yeah.
The other piece of development news is what's happening at the St. Julien. So I'm old enough and have lived in Boulder long enough to remember that prior to the St. Julien, there was a fantastic bar restaurant called the Oasis where the St. Julien sits. And in fact, I used to ride on Thursday nights on my cruiser bike ride with my golden retriever in a trailer. And we would stop at the Oasis, and Marley would run into the restaurant, and they would totally not care. And he would be like running around the kitchen, and they would be feeding him. They used to really cater to the cruisers on Thursday night. So it was a favorite hangout of that crowd back in the day.
Cool.
But then the St. Julien, a luxury hotel and spa, was created. And as part of that development of the hotel and spa, the Civic Pad, which I think is actually where the Oasis was located. The concrete pad was created. So that was a compromise between public and private use of the land, and the developer agreed to dedicate the Civic Pad for public community use. And they built their hotel. And since that time, nothing has ever been done with the Civic Pad. It's just a concrete pad. The cruisers will do donuts in it, like they'll do.
I was going to say
it
looks like a parking lot. Yeah.
It is not even a parking lot. It's not even parking spaces. Yeah. It's just a concrete pad that gets no use.
There's a sign that says no bicycle riding.
I know, and there's a sign that says no bicycle riding. Although the cruisers will often come through there and ride their bicycles there. It's the most absurd result
use of space.
of a planning process gone awry. And what's happening now is that the St. Julien is planning a large extension, and it will add a huge number of hotel rooms. And once again, the public use of this land is being discussed and debated. The connectivity between the St. Julien and Pearl Street is being discussed and debated in City Council. It is very much in the public eye at the moment, and we'll go through a site review process. It will be something to behold as community members share their concerns over what will be redeveloped, but likely it will be redeveloped. So if you care about the potential future of the Civic Pad, and
the beloved Civic Pad,
and want to see and want an example of a planning process that went sideways with the result. That's a great example. So hopefully council gets it right this time around, and we get something that actually benefits the public, as we permit development to occur in one of the most premier spots in Boulder.
Truly.
Prime real estate.
Yeah. I can't believe they just let it be a pad. For how many years?
Oh. I lost track of when this happened.
Over a decade,
I
right?
feel like it's 15 years ago that St. Julien was developed. It was a long time ago. So I first moved to Boulder in 2000, and we moved back in 2005. I moved back in 2005, and Marley was with us at that point, so it wasn't built in 2005. So it's not 20 years.
Yeah, but it's still, a decade of vacant slab.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Our last little tidbit in the news is that Mitchell Byars, our beloved reporter for the Daily Camera, announced he's leaving the Daily Camera. This is about a month ago. And Amber Carlson, also a reporter for the Daily Camera, just announced 2 days ago that she is leaving the Daily Camera. And over the years, the Daily Camera's quality of reporting has been challenged. They've gotten some great people. Mitchell and Amber were solid reporters who I deeply appreciated tweeting and reporting, covering council in real time. There were others before them. Hopefully the Camera can attract some high quality, attract high quality talent. I know there's still people there that are fantastic, but it's not a good sign that we're losing great reporters. So wanted to bid them farewell and best wishes for their future career prospects. I know Mitchell is tweeting from his family home in Hawaii right now, so I don't feel too bad for him.
Yeah, he escaped the cold. I didn't know of Mitchell or Amber until I joined House Einstein, and I got on our Twitter and saw that we're following him, and I was like, oh, this guy's great, followed him on my personal, and kind of a bummer, because I'd hop on Twitter, seeing his posts were really kind of like that's what's going on in the local area. So
he had personality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Hamish. So we are at an hour 22.
We're nailing this. Timing
right,
wise.
and I just need to take a quick gander at calendar for a moment, because I have a showing at 3:30.
Mm-hmm. And it's 3. And then you gotta go.
I have to go. We need to wrap up. So, quick carve out, Hamish. You got 60 seconds.
I went to New Zealand. I'm from there, and I hadn't been back since I left at 14 years old. So I had a fantastic little 2 weeks before our team retreat, where I went all the way down and through memory lane, hundreds of miles traveled up to the very north of New Zealand, through my schools, elementary school, high school, old house, everything. And it was absolutely amazing to go back and re-experience or kind of revisit childhood lane, memory lane, and see a lot of old friends and everything as well. So I'll be making a point to get out there and get back there. Definitely not as long as it has been this time around. So yeah, absolutely fantastic getting back down there, and really glad that happened. Yeah.
I can't believe it's been 20 years since you'd been to New Zealand. Saw your family there.
12, yeah.
Astounding. Or 12 years, sorry.
Yeah,
12 years.
but still, right? Like, so, really, really, really cool. Yeah.
All right, well, that's much too fast for a real carve-out. So I'm going to skip mine, and we'll share tales of my adventures around the retreat next time.
Maybe I'll follow up.
And maybe you'll follow up, too, because there's a lot more to those details. But clients come first, and we are out of time. So thank you for joining the House Einstein Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, do the things, share it with your friends, leave us a comment. We love our comments on the pod. Don't forget to check out our social media. You'll find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X. Of course, houseeinstein.com is our primary website. If you want to see what we're doing, YouTube's a great place to actually see what we look like, and check out some of our listing videos if you're thinking about selling your house. Yeah. Check out some of the neighborhood videos if you're thinking about buying a house. Thank you so much for joining us. We deeply appreciate you as listeners, and we will catch you next time.
See ya.